Hello, hello. This is Sheri from the Sheri Kaye Hoff Show, where we focus on living joyfully and successfully in your life and business. You can find us at sherikayehoff.com. That's SherikayeHoff.com. On the Sheri Kaye Hoff Show, we feature interesting people doing interesting things. My guest, Courtenay Turner, is the host of the Courtenay Turner Podcast, WIM, What is Movement, and her new show coming soon, The Right Voices. She is also a speaker and aerial acrobatic performer. She spent her academic career in the topics of philosophy and psychology, and also being a passionate athlete and performing artist. This paved the way for the world in which she is currently immersed. Courtenay is an overcomer. Let's hear her share her story today. Hi, Courtenay. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to talk to you. And you have such an incredible story and so much value to share here today with our guests. So why don't we just start with your story and how you got to where you are today?
All right. Well, the Cliff Notes version would be that my mom was sick during first trimester of pregnancy. The doctor, so my mom's OBGYN, was friends with my parents, and the wife had been traveling and she had been diagnosed with German measles. And my father, about, I don't know, maybe a week or so later, fell ill. He was pretty sure that that's what he had. And about 10 days later, my mom found a rash on her upper chest. And she had no other real symptoms. It was very mild, but she knew she was pregnant. And so she was very concerned. She started doing all sorts of research. And she went to go have the titer tested. But the doctor was dyslexic. He read the titer as being 112, meaning that I was not afflicted. But the titer was really 121, meaning that I was. So when I was born, they were kind of covering up for this doctor who had made a mistake. But my mom was pretty convinced something was not quite right. In particular, she kept seeing that one of my eyes was rolling up in the top of my head. And they kept telling her, don't worry about it, baby's eyes don't focus. And she said, but one eye focuses, why isn't the other eye focusing? So she finally found a doctor after determining that my eye looked a lot like her father's, who just had cataracts. So she found a doctor who confirmed that I was born with a cataract. They did a cataract procedure when I was about 3 months old. But cataract removal back then was very different than it is today. And they pulled the iris and they left debris behind the retina. So they had to go back and do what's called a retinal cleanup. And when they did that, they found rubella pigmentation behind my sighted eye, the other eye. And they determined that I was then going to be completely blind, deaf, autistic, retarded, and that the only hope my mom had was to find a nice institution for me to spend my life. Fortunately, my mom did not believe this and really kept fighting for me and trying to find ways that we could, deal with whatever it was going to be. What we did find is that I was hearing impaired very significantly. I actually learned how to speak by reading lips. I was going to sneeze. Sorry. I didn't get hearing aids until I was almost 6 years old because I learned how to speak by reading lips, but I do have a significant hearing impairment bilaterally in both ears. I had heart surgery when I was a year old. I was born with fine graphic motor impairment, hypotonic limbs, stunted growth, asymmetrical bone development, dental complications, all sorts of problems. So they told my mom that that was the best she could hope, was to find a nice institution for me to spend my life. So, yeah, so we were, we kind of really tried to resist that. And we found many ways to deal with the challenges at hand. So, which I can go into if you'd like. But
yeah, but you're just like doing remarkable today. So you started with a mom who really believed and advocated for you. Mm-hmm. And now tell us about some of the incredible things that you're doing today and how you're helping people. And really, I mean, I would say like you're far beyond a normal life. You're living a stellar life.
Thank you. So today I'm involved in several different things that seem kind of unrelated. I think they're very related, though. I have a podcast. I'm the Courtenay Turner Podcast, and I spell my name like Courtenay. So it's the court, but it's pronounced Courtney, but it's spelled Courtenay. So I have a podcast I release 3 times a week. I do aerial acrobatic performances and motivational speaking. I talk about using movement as a metaphor for life and physical training as a teacher to help you overcome adversity and challenges in other areas of life. And then I have a couple of other projects. I've got a show. It's called WIM, What is Movement? And that's where we explore ways that movement helps people to heal emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And then I have a roundtable a female show that's called The Right
Okay.
Voices.
Okay, so you have your hands in a lot of things.
Yeah.
So when you talk about physical movement for healing and for success and making your life better, how do you get people started with that? Like, give me an example of what that looks like.
So it's going to be different for everyone. So my slogan is that all human beings are designed to move. The ways in which we do are our unique creative expression. So, of course, people always like to find to play contrarian, like what's the one, devil's advocate, right? And even somebody who's completely paralyzed will use their eyes to communicate. So there is movement. There's always movement. I kind of believe if you're not moving, then you're stagnant. If you're stagnant, you're dying. So, yeah. And now that we have technology that actually helps those people, they can, write with eye movement. So it really is going to be, I only bring up that example to show that it will really be different. That's such an extreme example, but it's going to be very, very different for everyone. For some people, it's their daily wellness walks, I call them. Some people who, even professional athletes, will do daily wellness walks as well. And for somebody who maybe is not very active, that wellness walk could be a workout. So it really is different. Some people are they like to do something that's more overtly creative physically, like dance, or I do aerial. So it's going to vary, but I tell people that they need to find what they like and really dive into that. And it's not always going to be the same, even for the same person. Some days I want to go to CrossFit, other days I prefer something like aerial, and other days I want something a little bit more mellow. So
yeah. So I like what I notice is laying around just breeds more laying around.
Right. A body emotion stays in motion, a body rest. Yeah. No, there's a lot of truth to that. I tell people typically the first thing to start with is walking. If people start with walking 15 minutes a day, it usually leads to more. And that seems to be pretty accessible for most people. And there's so many benefits to it that are not necessarily obvious. I think it has a lot of grounding benefits, especially if you walk outside in nature. You're getting direct sunlight, which is, has tremendous benefits for your circadian rhythm and for your hormone health. But it's also, I think it's kind of meditative for people. Walking is something that not everybody's built to run, but really most people are built to walk. So.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And I know for me, I'm a really spiritual person. And so I love to meditate and do things like that. But I find that, sometimes the meditation is, just turning on some drums and dancing, and that's a meditation. And so when I'm kind of getting too much into my head, or, too much into like sometimes it's almost like out of body. It's like doing something to completely ground myself and be in my body and be fully present makes a really big difference. And I know for a lot of people, when it comes to movement, what I hear from people in my coaching practice is kind of an all or nothing. Like if I don't have time for an hour workout, I don't have time for a workout, or it's the opposite of, if I do like a couple minutes of walking, that doesn't make a difference. And it's really like, sometimes it's even just standing up, getting ready to walk that starts it all, like and every minute, every 2 minutes, every 5 minutes does make a difference, and it
Oh,
starts creating
absolutely.
habits. Yeah.
You
So, I mean,
you ever tell somebody who's doing a 20-second all out sprint that meant nothing? I mean, that's, right there, that
right.
can, but those last like 3 seconds can be brutal.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And that's why I say start with a 15-minute walk. And it doesn't even have to be all at once. Accumulate, like 5 minutes at a time. But what I often find is there are very few people who, if they start with the intention of getting 15 minutes of some sort of intentional, it doesn't even have to be walking, but walking seems to be pretty accessible for a lot of people. That's usually what I recommend. But really just 15 minutes of any intentional movement a day. I think that is incredibly beneficial for people, and it usually leads to a lot more.
Yeah. And so, what about those people? So we're talking about getting started, but
Yeah.
also what about those people who are, like the extreme athletes? Like
Mhm.
my son Jeff runs 50 to 100-mile races,
Yeah.
and I mean that's totally on the other side
Sure.
of this whole movement thing. But is there a movement that he could do that would, instead of being like a competitive thing or like a
Yeah.
driving his body thing, like a more mindful thing? What would you recommend to someone like that?
I think it would really, I wouldn't give like a blanket kind of recommendation without knowing him. I would need to know him physically, and
Mhm.
I don't just mean by looking at him. I would
Right.
need to understand his physicality, like how he moves. And, I would need to understand a little bit about his routine, his personality before I could come up with some sort of a suggestion. But I would think that something that is a little bit more, not such a repetitive movement. The thing about running is it's very linear and it's very repetitive. So it can be very hard on the joints, and it can be it can lead to a lot of stiffness and a lot of muscle imbalances. So, I would probably, again, I would have to ask him some questions, but whatever it was, it would be something that was countering that. So something that maybe incorporates some lateral movement, something that incorporates, maybe some sort of stretching. And it doesn't have to necessarily be like passive stretching. It might be more mobility work to work on those imbalances. And then probably some resistance training, just because the body either likes to build or break down, so you're either an anabolic or catabolic, so it would probably something to counter that.
So what so that's interesting. So we've got kind of two extremes, like the person who isn't moving and the person who is, the extreme athlete. And it
Mhm.
seems like most of my kids have some version of, all the boys anyway, of the extreme athlete thing.
Yeah.
But they do things like, they love to dance and
Mhm.
rock climb, and so things
Yeah.
that change the focus. And
Yeah.
I think that's important. I think anytime we're just like stuck in a routine, I mean, there's a difference between a good habit and a routine that starts to just not be fun anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you had mentioned that the extreme athletes, they're competitive, right? So the movement that I would guide them towards would be something that's very non-competitive, something that incorporates either more restorative mindfulness or something that incorporates a lot of play. Either one could really work, or a combination thereof. But I think something that's outside of that competitive kind of, for me, the two that I engage in a lot are CrossFit and aerial acrobatics. And, aerial is much more of a performance art. So it's very expressive, it's very creative, it can be very playful, and it's performance oriented, but it's not really competition oriented. Whereas CrossFit, I don't compete anymore, but even when you're not competing, you're in that class environment. It can feel very competitive. So I feel like that's kind of a nice balance between the two. I'm a huge fan of walking as well. That I think of that as like my moving meditation. So
Yeah,
I do
I
trampoline classes as well.
oh, fun trampoline! That
I
sounds
love
fun.
trampoline. Yeah. It's really good for lymphatic drainage. And it
Oh,
also just feels very like, reminds you of childhood. So yeah, it's
yeah,
fun.
I like those things that remind you of childhood. Like on the 4th of July, we do a family volleyball tournament every
Mhm.
year, and then we also get out the croquet set. And this started a few years ago when I was remembering, 4th of July at my grandpa's house and how we always played croquet. And I was like, I wonder if they still sell croquet sets. And so it's fun to do movement together. So when people start either embracing movement or shifting their movement patterns, what are some of the benefits that people see?
So I often don't talk too much about the physiological, the emotional, mental benefits, because I feel like there's so much literature on that. And I don't need to, there's just copious, like kind of just unlimited information in that regard. Certainly we know all the physiological benefits of it, improving all your biomarkers, cognitive. Movement is one of the strongest mitigations against cognitive decline. I think anybody who has ever done a workout knows, if they were in a bad mood, it's pretty hard to be still in a bad mood after a good workout, right? So what I talk more about is the philosophical kind of benefits and tools. I think of it, I talk about it being a teacher. And I think that that's something that people don't think about too often, but it's very concrete. So it's not that you don't learn these lessons in other areas of life, but the lessons you learn from your physical training are pretty hard to ignore because they're very tangible. They're very concrete, practical. So the analogy would be if I were to, do a deadlift, I either lift the weight or I don't. There's really no in between. We can argue about maybe I didn't have the best form, I can improve my technique, but I either lift the weight or I don't. So and the the examples go on and on, but that's how tangible and how concrete literal movement is. So what I like people to look at is, how did you get there? I use the example often of when I was coaching CrossFit. It was mostly women who, if they couldn't do a push-up, it was a very daunting thing for them. And they would tell me that they were never going to be able to do push-ups on their feet. They could only do what they call girl push-ups on their knees, modified push-ups. And of course, for most people, that's not true. It's just going to take some time and it will take some progressive overload. And that one of the coolest things about coaching is watching people do something that they never thought they could do. And that sense of accomplishment. But I think that's such a great teacher because we all have challenges in life. Life is full of challenges. Life is full of adversity and obstacles. But physical training is all about challenges and obstacles. And I think through working on those, we can really examine what works for us in other areas of life. So that's typically really what I talk to people about, because I just think it's so valuable, and it's something that has direct transfer, but people don't often think about it. So
yeah, I love that. When I'm working with people and it's not the physical movement part, but when they say, I could never give a webinar, or I could never talk in front of a group of 100 people or 1,000 people or whatever. I always bring up, well, what areas in your life are you really successful at? Where did you overcome your challenges? And they'll give me like a whole big long list. And, my philosophy is if you're successful in one area, you can just transfer that success into another area. Like you learned something once, it means you can learn anything, at any time. So
absolutely. But I think of it as like, what is it that works? So look at those tools. So with, another example I always use is that even an Olympic athlete, no matter how talented that athlete is, they're not going to the Olympics by sitting on the couch all day. They have to put in the work, right? So they're constantly looking at, what worked. Was it, the habits that they built, the types of training they did, the types of recovery methods that they used, the mindset training. These are just examples I'm throwing out there, but it's endless, right? And it's going to be very personal for that individual. But that's what I want people to look at, because those are things that can directly carry over, the discipline that you used to get your first push-up, right? The consistency of work that you put in, right? That has carryover into really every other area of life, right? So
And when you look at, what works for people, I mean, I love people watching, and I love watching competitive sports and the Olympics. And, I study athletes' faces and body language. And, I find that the people who are able to stay loose, do better, perform better. And then instead of the people who start getting all tense and worried about the competition. And, they might have two athletes of the same talent, the same training level, but the person who can, get that relaxed, I like to call it relaxed action. You're firing up, but you're not tense. And, I kind of take this concept even for one of my son's coaches, who would always say before a game where they played an opponent that was supposed to, annihilate them, they'd start to feel the guys tightening up and getting tense, and just stay loose. And so I say, that's one of my things I say to myself when I get worked up about things, stay loose, stay loose.
totally. Well, it's actually neurologically speaking, is because you're the most you have peak performance when you have a combination of alpha and theta brainwave states. So that's kind of the, very relaxed, but it's like the two extremes, right, of the brainwave state. But when you have a combination of those, that's when you're in the zone, what they call, so it's a creative space, whether it be, in your physical practice, or whether it be, artistic creation. But that I think that's why that's what you're picking up on. It's that relaxed, but it's not relaxed like sleepy relaxed, right? It's relaxed, but very, very focused. So yeah.
Great. Sense. Well, so, we've talked a lot about the movement pieces, and I just want to open it up for you to just kind of bring forward any recent projects that you're working on. And I hate to ever have a guest leave and go, oh, I left this out, I wish I could have talked about this. So what do you wish you could talk about?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I mean, I definitely, people can go check out my podcast. I'm in the process. I just did an event 2 weeks ago where I spoke and I did an aerial performance. I'm preparing for another one January 14th. So people can follow me on my website, my social media. I'll start posting it as soon as we're still looking for a space. But as soon as we have that locked down, and that should be a pretty big event with several bands. I think we're even going to have a fire act, several speakers. So that should be really exciting. It's also the day before my birthday. So we're hoping that date's going to, work out. And other than that, I have a couple of things that, I'm teaming up with you guys. We're starting something called Pirate Stream Media. We've already launched 2 shows together. So we're going to start doing a regular show. And other than that, I'm got a bunch of things in the works. I have some writing I'm going to get back to. But yeah, if you stay on top of my my website, my social media, you'll find all that. So.
Okay. So direct us to your website.
Okay.
It's spell it out for us.
Yes, it's CourtenayTurner.com. So it's COURTENAY Turner, TURNER. It's all one word. And I don't believe it's case sensitive.com. So it's pronounced Courtenay, but it's spelled like Courtenay, CourtenayTurner.com.
Okay. And is there like any special place on your website that you want to direct people to? Or should they just like play around with the navigation?
I mean, it really depends on what they're looking for. I will have under the aerial and speaking events is where I'll have the notice about the January 14th. I don't have that up there yet because we haven't locked it down. But as soon as we do, I'll have that up there. All of my podcast episodes are there. I have a section for articles, so you can find my writing there. And I'm still in the process of updating it. So I think I have some of my affiliate links and stuff if you want discounts on things there. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I just really appreciate you being here with us today. And, we've talked about a lot. So, what is the one thing, if someone could just get started with something that would change their life today, what would you recommend that to be?
So what I always tell people, and I don't think this is so much like what they should start with, but it's something to keep in mind, is that you have a 1 in 400 trillion chance of being born. So they're now actually saying it's 1 in 400. One in 400 quadrillion is what they're saying now. And that's humans can't even fathom what those odds are. So that means that we are all miracles. And I think if I impart nothing else today, it is for you to understand that you are a living miracle and to go forth and act like it.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. Wow. So I want to thank you and thank all of our listeners wherever you are in the world. I really appreciate you, and I will talk to all of you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for having me.
Visit SheriKayeHoff.com. That's SheriKayeHoff.com for more podcast episodes, or you can say, Alexa, play the Sheri Kaye Hoff Show. This podcast is syndicated globally, and you can listen anywhere where you're listening to your other podcasts. Some examples are Apple, Google, Podlink, Podcast Addict, Spotify, and many more.